ASMR. Catechism L7 edition.
Hey, my name is Josh.
And my name is Ignatius.
And welcome back to... We need a name for this thing.
I'll use these things on the table.
Catechism Coffee Chats. Welcome back to the CCC.
Amazing.
So before we kick off today's lesson, we'd just like to take some time to thank you guys for responding to last week's lesson and video. We read through all of the responses. We really appreciate them. And we got to know your guys' personality a little bit from some of the responses you gave, because you gave pretty interesting replies.
Just like the one person who can freshen up our day, like how Listerine freshens up your breath.
You don't know this, but this was his 4th time trying to read that right.
Yep.
But yeah, we appreciate really bad jokes, so thank you, you know who you are. We also got some comments on the video quality and like the slides and stuff like that, how we're doing e-catechism. Again, it's our first time, so please tolong a bit, give us a bit of a chance. We're really trying our best. And we're not professional videographers by any means. He's a nurse, I'm a psychologist, or what I like to call unemployed. If you guys have any suggestions of what we can do better or any ways we can improve the slides or the lessons, do let us know in the comments, DM us, let your other catechists know as well, so we can all work on this together.
So while there are some comments on the video itself, there are also some questions that we found that were relatively interesting, such as wanting to learn about how God can still forgive us even though we still sin. So for all these questions that you might have, and we're thinking of doing a Q&A video, maybe sometime down the road, to answer these questions as they come along.
Yeah, there are other questions about generally faith, like how do we be more faithful, how do we learn more about God. This is stuff we're going to cover in catechism. But there were also very specific questions, right? Like how can God forgive us even though we still sin? That's a mystery to us as well. Why can't women be priests? Or I hope lessons can be fun. That's not a question, but we hope so too. Right, and all of these concerns, all of these questions are things we're going to answer in a separate video. So I suppose keep your questions coming and we'll see what we can do about it.
Yep.
So, Iggy, what are we doing today?
So today we'll be attempting to answer the question, is God real?
You know who his chosen people are? Israel. Now you may think that's a bad joke, right? But the word Israel comes from the term to wrestle with God. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to wrestle with God. We're going to wrestle with the question, is God real? Is real? I don't know about you guys, but I've asked myself the question before, is God real? How do I know God's real when I can't see him? What about you?
Right, I also asked myself this question quite a bit also. I struggled days on end trying to answer the question, is he real? But I guess for me, the answer is he's real.
I think it's fine to struggle with this, right? It's fine to question these things. We learn science and stuff. We have logical reasoning. We've got brains to think, right? Yeah. So today, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna try and find the balance between our logical reasoning and scientific side of life and our minds, and the faith side of life. Because science is true, and faith, or the Bible, what the Bible says, what the church teaches, we're also taught that it's true, right? But sometimes these things contradict. So today we're going to find out how they don't actually contradict, because truth cannot contradict truth.
Okay, so today we'll be looking through the lenses of St. Thomas Aquinas. Now, who is Thomas Aquinas?
He's a smart saint.
And we'll be looking at some of his works, mainly his logical approaches to is God real, a summary of his 5 arguments as well.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing in the slides today, but to kick you off, we're just going to TLDR his 5 arguments. Welcome to WatchMojo.com.
Man, that's copyright.
Number 1, the argument of motion. So Ignatius, apart from taking a dump, what do you know about motion?
Motion is movement, basically, isn't it?
Right? Movement. And everything in the world is moving. For example, I move the coffee to the center of the table. I am the mover of the coffee. Without the mover, the coffee won't move. And if nothing is moving, then nothing can move other things. So therefore, there had to be a first mover, and this is what we call God.
Number 2, cause and effect. So like you have ingredients in front of you and you want to cook something, right? It's not going to cook on its own unless you take the ingredients and go and cook the dish that you want to cook.
Right, so God is sort of like the chef in that example. We've got all the particles in the world, but someone had to put them together to create the world. And that's what we call God. Right, number 3 is the argument for existence. This one is a little bit chim, so bear with me. There are things in this world. They don't have to exist. For example, I could not have been born and the world would still move on. That can be said for anything. Can be said for Ignatius, can be said for this phone, can be said for the camera, can be said for our drinks. But using that logic, there's some point of time where none of these things would have existed. But if none of these existed, then no other things could have existed, right? What made these things? So therefore, there has to be at least one thing that has to exist in itself.
Okay.
And that is what we call God.
Number 4, which is progression. So like, this tea, there's a scale, right? There's a scale of how cold it is. There's a scale of how good it tastes. There's a scale of, how much is left inside. On this scale, there's to be something that's the max of everything, right? Say for example, the coldest or the fullest in our world. There has to be something that's perfect, full. There's got to be something that's loving and the kindest. In this case, it's God.
And the 5th and final argument is the argument for design. So very simply put, let's use this phone as an example. The phone is intelligent, it's smart, you can Google things and it will tell you things. But the phone did not always exist. Somebody had to design it that way. And now when we look at humans, right, we look at the earth. These things function in an intellectual way. There's a routine, there's a system to it, but we couldn't have created that ourselves, right? The earth couldn't create itself. So there had to be something that designed the earth to be smart in the way it is.
But all these are just a simple summary of these 5 arguments, and to know more you might want to look at the slides. So check out the slides first, man.
Pause here!
Okay, stop recording. Alright, welcome back. So now you're more inclined to think that maybe God is real and God exists. But now we're trying to answer the question, why does it matter that God exists? Why? So why does it exist? Why does it matter?
Yeah, so why does it matter that God exists, right? I know He's real, but why should I care? We're gonna answer that in 2 ways. We're gonna share some personal stories, but first we're gonna see if we can answer that using the analogy of gravity. Alright, so Ignatius, what is gravity? Right, so gravity is that force that holds us to the ground, it gives us weight. We know that things fall, basically. We can't see gravity.
Yeah, we can't.
But we know it's there.
Yeah,
because we can see the effects of it in our lives. So someone could come up to both of us and say, oh, hey guys, gravity is a thing, right? It's a force holding you down. It makes things fall. Ignatius, for example, could say, alright, I can't see gravity, so you know what, I'm not gonna buy it and I'm gonna live my life as it is. Since there's nothing holding me to the ground, if I jump out the window, I'm gonna fly up. Whereas I could say, or maybe even if I have some doubts about it, I could say, alright, I see where you're coming from, I'm willing to explore that, and I do see its effects in my life. So I know that if I jump out of the window, these are things I see in my life. If I jump out of the window, I'm gonna fall. These are what we believe. This is what goes on in our heads. But in real life, we both know that if both of us jump out the window, regardless of our different beliefs, we're both gonna fall to the ground. And these are the real consequences of that invisible force. The same can be said about God. God is an invisible force. Right? We can't see God, but we can see some of the effects He has in our lives. Yeah, so for example, some of the works of God that we can see in our lives would be part of the 5 arguments, right? The creation of the earth, the first movement of things, the design of everything intelligent, etc., etc. But it doesn't just stop there, right? God has to do with more than creation. He has to do with salvation, right? Dying on the cross for us. He has to do with things like love in the world. He has to do with life and death, the afterlife, right? Heaven, hell, what happens to us when we die. These are big questions that affect all human beings. Regardless of what we choose to believe, I could choose to live like God exists, I could choose to live like God doesn't exist. But since we now know that God exists, we're both going to be affected by those real consequences of that. When we die, I think we sort of want to be prepared to know about God. We would want to know about what's going to happen, right? And that's why it should matter to us that God exists. But of course, that's a very logical approach. It's all up in our heads. We're going to bring it down to our hearts a bit, right? Why does it matter to us? So Ignatius, why don't you kick us off?
So for me, God has been actively reaching out to me a lot in my life. He's been there for most of my life, actually. I've shared last week about Him calling me to go join the service. And I'll share a lot more stories along the way. But personally, if I were to answer this question, as to why does it matter that God's real? It's simply because I really want to know, if this thing, is this voice, or is this person who's reaching out to me, is it real, or is it just my own imagination? Alright, so Josh, how about you tell me your story?
Oh, yeah, unlike Ignatius here, I don't necessarily see or hear God audibly, right? But like many of you, when I was your age, I did want to be a better person, right? I wanted to be a good person. It was a natural part of me. But that's sort of a difficult thing to do, I think, when you're a teenager. And just some background, I was from St. Patrick's School. St. Pat's, it's a Catholic boys' school where the least Catholic things happen. A lot of things happen there that I'm not proud of. I sort of hung out with the popular kids, and there were some things that we did that I didn't necessarily agree with. Things like making fun of teachers, making fun of classmates, alienating them. I remember one time, I think one of us was using our phones at the back of class, and they were just looking at pictures of girls and calling them whales and stuff like that. And in my head, I was like, wow, this is really wrong. I'm uncomfortable. But outwardly, I was just laughing along because I was scared of doing what's right. Then, as sort of church catechism stuff progressed, I sort of got to know Jesus, right? I got to know the story of Jesus. I got to know about the story of Jesus, and I think what that did for me, why it matters that Jesus is real to me, is because He gave me a reason to step out of that fear. He gave me a reason to do good, right? He gave me a reason to not think about myself anymore. Because in those moments, right? In those moments, I was I wanted to do the good thing, but how my friends see me, keeping my friends is more important to me, right? For me. But as time progressed, as I got to know more about this God guy, I began to see that life isn't so much about me. In fact, it's not about me at all, right? So I think Sec 4, I said a prayer, I took a risk at the start of the year. I just completely shifted my seat to the front corner right in front of my teacher's desk. And that was a big change, right? That was frightening. The fear didn't disappear. But I had a reason now to combat that fear, right? I had a reason now to stop doing bad things. So that for me is why God matters to me. He gives me a reason, a more meaningful reason to live. Yeah, He gives me a reason to do good, to be good, to go beyond myself. I think the irony of it is that even though I try to live less for myself now, I'm getting more out of it. I won't say I'm happy all the time, but I'm more joyous than I ever was before because I can be me, right? I think in all of this, the big question that got me thinking was sort of the same question we're asking, right? Why does it matter to you that God exists? Or why should you give your life to God? And I think the question I asked myself was the opposite. Why should it matter to God that I exist? Why should it matter to God that He gave His life for me? Because I am no one in the grand scheme of things. And because He has no reason to love me, I've got all the reason to love others. I've got all the reason to love Him. Right? And maybe that's something for all of us to think about.
Oh, thanks, Josh. So here you can see that we all have our different reasons. Josh is perhaps to do good. Mine is perhaps to know if this voice inside is not some random voice and God's real, right? So here is the challenge for you all. To find that reason for yourself. Why does it matter that God exists? Because we can sit here all day and tell you all our stories, but what really matters is that you find your reason as to why does it matter that God exists.
Yeah, right. So we've got the facts. We know that God is real, and what that means is that love for you is real. It means that someone died for you, right? It means that there's someone always with us. Is someone strengthening us all the time. We don't need to be alone anymore. We don't need to be scared. But the question is how much we're gonna let that affect our lives, right? Again, these are the real consequences, right? The consequences are that we are loved. We are not alone. We've been given a spirit of counsel, not a fear of boldness. How are we going to respond to that? That's a big question today. We don't expect you guys to find an answer immediately. You're 13, right? So we didn't find the answers till we were really old.
Yeah.
And there's some Catholics out there still searching for the answer, but I think that's what matters. It's the searching, right? Are we gonna search for the answer?
Like we said in the previous video, it's a process. It's not gonna happen instantly. You're gonna search. You're gonna look for the answers yourself. But at the end of the day, we all have questions, right? So feel free, to ask us your questions, and like I said earlier in the video, we'll try to answer them in a Q&A video that we'll try to make somewhere down the road.
Yeah. So until then, I've been Josh,
And I've been Ignatius.
and this has been CCC.
Yeah, boy! Woohoo! Yeah!